I now hand the conference over to Ms. Bunny Babjee from JM Financial Institutional Securities Limited. Thank you, and over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Bajaj Finserv's earnings call to discuss the first quarter FY22 results. To discuss the same, we have on the call Mr. Srinivasan Sir, CFO Bajaj Finserv Limited, Mr. Tapan Singhel Sir, CEO Bajaj Allianz General Insurance Limited, Mr. Tarun Chugh, CEO Bajaj Allianz Life Insurance Limited, Mr. Ramandeep Singh Sahni, CFO Bajaj Allianz General Insurance Limited, and Mr. Bharat Kalsi, CFO Bajaj Allianz Life Insurance Limited. May I request Mr. Srini sir to take us through the financial highlights, post which we can open the floor for Q&A session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Barney. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the conference call to discuss the results of Bajaj Finserv Limited for Q1 FY22, which is the financial year 21-22. As before, in this call, we will largely be concentrating on the consolidated results as well as the results of our insurance operations through Bajaj Allianz General Insurance and Bajaj Allianz Life Insurance, and where material, the standalone results of our company. Bajaj Finance Limited, BFL, which is another major subsidiary of ours, has already had its conference call. However, if there are any high-level questions on BFL, we would be glad to take that as well. We will not be taking any questions on the status of Allianz's stake in our insurance company, except to state that the status has remained the same as at the end of the previous quarter and there is no change. Any statements that may look like forward-looking statements are just estimates and do not constitute an assurance or indication of any future performance result. A few remarks on Ind AS to clean up the hygiene disclosures. As required by regulation, BFS has adopted Indian Accounting Standards or Ind AS from FY19. The insurance companies are not covered under Ind AS. They have prepared Ind AS financials only for the purpose of consolidation. Accordingly, for BAGIC and BALIC, the standalone numbers reported below are based on non-Ind AS accounting standards or Indian GAAP as applicable to insurance companies. Our results, the press release accompanying the results, and our investor deck have been uploaded on our website yesterday evening. Let me now give you an update on the performance for Q1 of FY 2022. After a brief recovery in Q4 of FY21, economic conditions, as you are aware, worsened in Q1 FY22 as the second wave of COVID spread across the country. This led to localized strict lockdowns in many states. Under these challenging times, our businesses focused primarily on managing risk with a calibrated approach to growth. Despite external challenges posed by the second wave in the form of provisions for loan losses and COVID claims affecting health and life insurance claims, we saw many positives as well in this quarter. BFL was able to grow its AUM quarter on quarter and further continued the acceleration of its business transformation plan, which was announced late last year. The bounce rates were significantly lower than Q1 of FY21 and only 8% higher. Bajaj Housing Finance recorded good growth in its AUM and profit after tax. BAGIC reported an underwriting profit while growing better than market in most preferred segments. BALIC had an excellent quarter of growth, was unable to increase its new business value year on year. Let me now touch upon each of our businesses. While April started off reasonably well for the general insurance industry and for BAGIC, the second wave of COVID resulted in localized lockdowns in many states across India. This led to slowdown in the economy and in turn lower sales of motor vehicles and creation of assets in the economy. In contrast to the complete lockdown in Q1 of FY21, localized lockdown in Q1 FY22 led to positive growth. However, as compared to Q4 of FY21, growth was lower. BAGIC's growth of 9.1% during the quarter was marginally lower than industry, which grew at 11.1%. Excluding government business, which is predominantly crop and health, BAGIC's GWP grew by 10.8% as against an industry growth of 11.6%. BAGIC continues its approach to calibrated growth, that is, seeking to grow in preferred segments, which are private cars, two-wheelers, commercial lines, which are property, engineering, and retail health, while remaining cautious on group health. BAGIC has done better and grown faster than market on most of these preferred segments. To give some more detail, growth in Q1 was driven by motor two-wheeler and motor four-wheeler reporting growth of 23% and 10.3% respectively, while commercial vehicles continue to be stressed on growth. Given the fact that in the Insurance Information Bureau or IIB-based premium rate hikes for property was started in Q4 of FY20, the base for Q1 FY22 was already at a higher rate. Notwithstanding this, Bajic's commercial lines growth of 14% was very satisfactory and higher than the industry growth of 8.2%. Within the commercial lines, property fire grew by 11%, engineering grew by 26.9%, and liability insurance grew by 21.3%. The 2-year CAGR, which compares the growth with pre-COVID base for commercial lines, was 26.9%. Bajic's wide and deep bancassurance tie-ups, direct corporate, strong broker relationships, and dedicated multi-line agency force were large contributors in this substantial level of growth. On the retail health insurance end, Bajic continued the momentum from previous year as increased COVID positivity rate during the wave 2 heightened the need for protection. Bajic registered a growth of 30.8%, slightly lower than the overall industry, despite lower sales of corona-specific products as compared to Q1 of FY21. During wave 2, COVID claims hit the industry much harder than wave 1. While in wave 1, majority of the mortality and morbidity cases were in the 50-plus segment, in this wave, lower age groups were also severely hit. This caused more claims on group health segment and also in the group and individual life segments, in addition to retail health. I will give you some flavor of the impact of wave 2. The second wave resulted in much higher frequency, with 27,000 plus claims reported in Q1 FY22, as against a total of 32,000 plus claims reported during the whole of FY21. That is to say, over 80% of the claims reported in FY21 have already been reported in Q1 FY22. This has resulted in increase in COVID claims cost to the tune of rupees 283 crores in Q1 FY22, while in the previous year, the same quarter, it was just rupees 14 crores. However, by June, the cases had started tapering off. Secondly, on the motor OD, claims frequency, which was very low in Q1 FY22, it had picked up to near pre-COVID levels by Q4 of FY21. In this quarter, Q1 FY22, the frequencies were much higher than Q1 of FY21 since we did not have a complete lockdown and we had mostly localized lockdown and vehicle movement had not come to a standstill. Overall, frequencies were slightly below pre-COVID levels. Then the impact of claims from two cyclones, Tauktae and Yas, while the amounts were relatively much lower than the other two factors of COVID claims, we still had the modest impact in this quarter. As a result, the claim ratio for Q1 FY22 increased to 75.9% as against 68.1% in Q1 FY21. On account of higher claim ratio, the combined ratio for the quarter ended slightly above 100% and stood at 103.4%, which we hope will still be among the best in the industry during this challenging quarter. Despite these negative factors affecting the industry, Bajic was able to record an underwriting profit of rupees 15 crores. Bajic's profit after tax for Q1 FY22 ended at 362 crores. And this is a non-annualized return on equity of about 5% for the quarter. To summarize, a tough quarter and Bajic did very well. Let me now come to life insurance. During the quarter, on account of lower base and strong growth seen from December 2020, the industry in April continued to show excellent growth. But with wave 2 of COVID-19 peaking in May and resultant strict lockdowns, there was a slowdown in May and in early part of June. Despite these challenges, BALIC continued to do well both in absolute terms and relative to the industry. In Q1 FY22, BALIC, with individual rated new business growth of 49%, was the fastest growing among the top 10 private players, who grew by 26%. As a result, BALIC's market share increased from 5.7% to 6.7% in Q1 FY22 on this metric. In addition, BALIC's individual rated new business 2-year CAGR, where the basis of pre-COVID levels stood at 22%, versus private players 2-year CAGR of -1%, and that is the highest in the industry. The annuity product launched by BALIC in Q4 FY21 was very well received by the market. During the quarter, approximately 12% of the individual rated NB was from the annuity segment. Demand for retail protection was higher than in Q1 FY21, was much higher. In Q1 FY22, on account of higher prices, the demand had tapered off. It had already started tapering off by second half of last year. But contribution of protection to the mix has sequentially quarter-on-quarter improved and is better than Q4 of FY21. The risk appetite of the retail saver seems to have increased as evidenced by the strong demand for ULIPs. BALIC's ULIP contribution to product mix was 39% in the quarter. Guaranteed non-par savings were muted in the quarter with a small degrowth. The par segment, which had degrown quite substantially in Q1 of FY21, has picked up and recorded a year-on-year growth of 165% and a 2-year CAGR comparing to the pre-COVID levels of 24% per annum. All our main channels, agency, institutional business, which includes bancassurance and BALIC Direct, recorded excellent growth. Let me come to group business of the life insurance company. As compared to Wave 1, group protection business was less impacted in Wave 2 as it grew by 268% in Q1 FY22. This was mainly on account of a lower base. In absolute terms, the business is still below pre-COVID levels and is about 56% lower than Q4 of FY21. As a major portion of the group protection business, as you are aware, is from group credit protection, and which is largely dependent on disbursement of loans by banks and NBFCs. Due to the Wave 2, such disbursements had also come down, and therefore this business will follow that metric. Overall, group new business grew by 92% from 397 crores in Q1 FY21 to 762 crores in Q1 FY22, which is above the pre-COVID levels. Renewals registered a strong growth of 27%, and as a result of these factors, BALIC GWP grew by 48% to 2,516 crores. I will now cover claims, especially COVID claims as affecting the life insurance business. As mentioned before, the morbidity and mortality impact of Wave 2 was felt across all age groups, more so in the 30 to 50 age group this time. Like the GI industry's health claims, BALIC and the life insurance industry too recorded significantly higher death claims on account of COVID-19 in the quarter. On the retail side, BALIC has settled around 1,600 claims pertaining to COVID-19. As a result, overall COVID claim costs reserving for BALIC in Q1 FY22 was 288 crores versus a mere rupees 1 crore in Q1 FY21. BALIC has adequately provisioned for probable future claims as things stand today and the best estimates available as on 30th June. And the total reserve as on 30th June stands at rupees 304 crore. The reserves as at 31st March were 98 crore. The 304 crore is the net reserve. As mentioned before, we have declared our new business value in our investor presentation. From now on, we will be making quarterly disclosures of NBV. In addition to the NBV for the quarter, we have also indicated the NBV for the 12 months ended 30th June 2021. Due to high variations in the seasonality of business across quarters, I would advise investors to exercise caution while reading into Q1 NBV and the margins. We had mentioned earlier in our calls that quarterly NBVs and NBMs may not reflect the possible year-end results. Investors may already be aware that as a significant portion of life insurance business comes in H2 and especially in Q4, most of the fixed costs borne by the life insurance company during the year gets absorbed in the second half of the year. Please note that NBV on rolling 12-month basis does not indicate a forecast or expectation of FY22. The new business value, net of expense overruns, the key metric of profitability for life business, increased to rupees 25 crores in Q1 FY22 from a negative of rupees 14 crores in Q1 FY21. For the 12 months ended 30th June 2021, the NBV was rupees 400 crore as against 212 crore for the 12 months ended 30th June 2020 and rupees 361 crore for financial year 2021. Good news from the life side is that the 13-month persistency, which was somewhat lower in Q1 FY21, has rebounded and has reached 82%, 5% higher than the previous year. Through initiatives such as driving auto payment, digital payments, and collection of high-value non-persistent cases, the persistency has improved, not just for the 13th month, but also across all cohorts. BALIC's PAT for the Q1 at rupees 84 crores was lower than rupees 130 crores of Q1 FY21 on the back of higher COVID claims and reserving. Rupees 255 crore post-tax is the impact, as well as the new business strain because of the strong growth, which were partially offset by the reversal of income tax provision of rupees 161 crores on account of favorable assessment order received for assessment years 2012-13 and 13-14, These orders were received by us in the last week of June. Overall, an excellent quarter for BALIC, both on the top line and on NBV. Finally, both insurance companies are financially among the most solvent, BALIC with 648% and BAGIC with 340%, and hence are well poised to weather any external adversity that might affect solvency. Both BAGIC and BALIC continue to utilize their digital properties and continue to emerge stronger through the crisis. We have seen a substantial increase in digital penetration across several parts of the distribution and service chain across both our insurance companies. Further details regarding BAGIC and BALIC's digital capability are covered in the investor deck uploaded on the website yesterday. Let me now come to BFL. BFL has already had its investor call, and hence we will only broadly touch upon the results. Quarter one was significantly impacted by the severe second wave. Both business and debt collection efficiencies were affected due to strict lockdowns across many parts of India. Despite this, AUM grew by 15% YOY to 1,59,000 odd crores. And in the absence of a third wave, the company expects quarterly AUM growth to revert to almost the pre-COVID levels. Core AUM accretion in Q1 FY22 was approximately rupees 4,100 crores. That's the absolute amount of accretion to the AUM, as against a reduction by 9,000 crores in Q1 of FY21. The second wave caused a marginal increase in EMI bounce rates in Q1 FY22 over Q4 FY21. Average bounce rates in Q1 FY22 were approximately 1.08x of Q4 FY21. During Q1 of FY21, the investors may recall that BFL's bounce rates had increased to nearly 2.5 to 3x the pre-COVID levels. On account of regional lockdowns, 4.63 million loans only were booked by BFL during the quarter. There is slightly less than 5.47 million loans booked in Q4 of FY21. However, 1.88 million new customers were acquired during the quarter, and they are in line with the company's general guidance of new customer acquisition of 7 to 8 million for the whole year. In Q1 FY22, BFL recorded a pre-provisioning operating profit of 3,116 crore and made loan loss provisions, including expected losses of rupees 1,750 crores as compared to 1,686 crores. The second wave resulted in significantly subdued collection efficiencies, leading to higher stage 2 and stage 3 assets. BFL continues to balance growth vis-a-vis risk and collections while maintaining strong liquidity and capital adequacy. BFL carries a management overlay of rupees 483 crore in its provision for expected credit loss, as against rupees 840 crore as of 31st March 2021. The gross NPA and net NPA, recognized as per extant RBI prudential norms and provisioned applying the expected credit loss method prescribed in Ind AS as of 30th June 2021, stood at 2.96% and 1.46% respectively, compared to 1.79% and 0.75%. As investors may be aware, BFL and other NBFCs are required to provide for expected credit losses over the life of the loan under Ind AS. We understand Ind AS is not yet applicable to banks. In their call, BFL has given the estimates of credit costs for the year to be rupees 4,200 to rupees 4,300 crore for the whole year. This compares with approximately 5,900 crores for the whole of FY21. Overall, BFL has pre-provision profitability remains strong and at the moment, based on the available estimates, adequate to cover expected losses. PAT for Q1 FY22 increased 4% to rupees 1,002 crores versus 962 crores in Q1 FY21. The capital adequacy ratio as of 30th June 21 was very strong and stood at 28.5%, and the Tier 1 capital also has crossed 25%. For Bajaj Housing Finance Limited, the mortgage subsidiary of BFL, the capital adequacy ratio stood at 22%. Finally, BFL's business transformation is on track for phase 1 to go live by end of September or early October 2021. In summary, BFL is well positioned to navigate any temporary stress, and I would request investors wanting to have more information to go through BFL's investor presentation and transcript of their investor call. Before I close, I'll come to the highlights of our consolidated financial results, which have been put up in our press release yesterday. Consolidated total income 13,949 crore for the quarter, compared to 14,192 crore in the same quarter of last year, marginally lower. Consolidated profit after tax 833 crore versus 1,215 crore. Bajaj Finance consolidated profit after tax 1,002 crore versus 962 crore. General insurance profit after tax 362 crore versus 395 crore, and life insurance shareholders profit after tax 84 crore versus 130 crore. A point to note that is under Ind AS, the insurance subsidiaries have chosen to hold a large part of the equity securities portfolio as fair value through profit and loss account. Therefore, the unrealized mark-to-market gain on investments included in consolidated profit was only 25 crore for Q1 of FY22 versus 330 crore for Q1 of FY21. This is one of the reasons for the larger drop in the consolidated profit after tax. But I must emphasize that these are unrealized losses. During Q1 of FY21, as you may be aware, equity markets had recorded stellar growth after a steep fall in Q4 of FY20. Therefore, year on year, this unrealized gain has reduced rupees 305 crore on the post-tax profit. This does not affect the core operating profits of our businesses as it is market linked. Final comments: with signs of the second wave ebbing, all our businesses will pursue opportunities to grow while maintaining focus on risk. At the same time, we remain cognizant and vigilant of a possible third wave. Our companies have been spearheading vaccination for all employees. Learning from each wave, our companies have strengthened their digital and touch-free offerings to their customers and intermediaries. Backed by strong solvency, well above the required capital, supported by healthy liquidity, continued focus on risk and collections, digitized processes, and improved cost structures, we are confident of being able to maneuver through these difficult times. That's all from me from the opening remarks. I will now open the floor for questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now begin the question and answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may press star and 1 on their touchtone telephone. If you wish to remove yourself from the question queue, you may press star and 2. Participants are requested to use handsets while asking a question. Ladies and gentlemen, we will wait for a moment while the question queue assembles. The first question is from the line of Ravi Mehta from Deep Financial. Please go ahead. Ravi, your line is in talk mode. You can go ahead, please. We would request you to unmute yourself if muted from the handset. As there is no response, I have muted the line. The next question is from the line of Prakash Kapadia from Anived Portfolio. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. A couple of questions. On the life insurance side, AP growth has been fairly strong for us. So is it low base of last year? Is it some specific, product demand or some specific channel where we are seeing traction? And, what kind of momentum can we see for the rest of the year on the life insurance side?
Yeah, I'll just briefly give an overview before I pass it on to Tarun. I think if you see the last few years, we have been engaged in a transformation process. This is a fairly intensive process of planning and execution. And in the process, we have rebuilt our channels, we have expanded our banker partnerships, we have remodeled our agency force, we have focused on cost, we have significantly digitized, taken a lot of actions. More importantly, we have also launched products, and some product lines we were not present have also been launched during this period, like term life and annuity. And in all these, I think our products remain among comparable to the best in class. So overall, when the growth obviously year on year also reflects the more subdued conditions in the same quarter of last year. Relative to market, I think we are growing very strongly on the back of all these factors. Strong performance across all channels. We cannot pick any one channel saying that it's performed better than the others. But it's a combination of good product mix, strong channel performance, and good execution. Tarun?
Yeah. I think Srini has directionally, I think, answered it, but let me just add a little bit more. So you are talking about whether it was only versus last year or the year prior and is it sustainable?
Right.
Right. So see, last year, of course, was muted for everybody, and the most insurance companies degrew last year, same quarter. We actually did not. We had a flat first quarter FY21. Last year, we grew by about 28% overall as a company, and this quarter we've grown at about 49%. The reason is largely on the lines of what Srini has talked about. So all channels, and particularly I would single out our agency channel has shown some good growth, because this year we've been able to sustainably, this calendar year, we've been able to hire advisors, which was a little of an issue last year because of the physical lockdown. And I think we've come to a situation as a company where our product mix has largely directionally stabilized, where we have a good sprinkling of par, term, and ULIP. To last year, as Srini mentioned, the transformation was massive over a period of time, and particularly showed some signs of stabilization, particularly last year, where our product mix and channel mix was changing constantly. So in 2015, we used to be 92% agency, but now we are around 44%, 44 to 45% agency. This quarter, we were 48% agency. So I think this transformation is over. We were, and we are now on a foundation for growth. What will it be like? I can't make any forward-looking statement, but I must say that the culture change, the change around business dynamics, and large business calls that we had to take are behind us now. Our product mix is also very well stabilized, and we are now into all the buckets of need buckets that we look at. Our last entry in need buckets was in the pension space, which was missing till I would say last quarter last year. We had Q4 FY21 is when we launched it, and this quarter we've been able to, of course, use that quite well, and because this product did not have any medical requirement, we've been able to get a lot of customers who weren't comfortable going into medicals take benefit of that. So we've been a little tactical in that way in taking benefit of this product. So I think you should see a good growth going forward, but that's all I can currently say.
Sure. That's helpful. Secondly, on the TP side, on the general insurance motor, any update on pricing by IRDAI? Because it's been some while. This year also, month. So any update from the regulator on the pricing?
You're talking about third-party pricing?
Yeah, third-party pricing.
Yeah. Tapan, would you like to take it?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that is something that you have to ask the regulator. From the industry side, we have been asking for it. I think it is there, and they have to come back on it. We don't have any information on that as yet.
And sorry. Lastly, any update on the mutual fund license which we applied to SEBI? It's been some while.
No, we have applied. They have a process of checking with all regulators. Then because of COVID, things are moving a bit slowly. They have conducted their on-site inspection also. We are hoping to get the license soon.
I'll join back the queue if I have more questions.
Yeah.
Thank you. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Sanket Godha from Spark Capital. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Sir, I have a couple of questions. One is just wanted to understand the strategic reason why Bajaj Finserv paid a 20% stake in Finserv Marketplace to Bajaj Finance. Just wanted to understand the overall logic behind of that deal. That's first question. And the second question is maybe I can go one by one. If you can answer this, then I have a couple of more questions on Bajaj and BALIC. I can answer.
Okay. Let me take that question. See, Bajaj Finserv is not selling any stake to Bajaj Finance. Finserv Direct, as you know, now as we told last year, we were fairly clear about the path of Finserv Direct as a neutral, open architecture marketplace. However, on the platform side, there is a lot of linkage between BFSD and Bajaj Finance, and Bajaj Finserv Direct is actually helping Bajaj Finance build its platforms as well. We believe there is a lot of advantages there. Bajaj Finance, while they build this platform, which supports its core lending business, will also require a strong, stable, long-term partner who can deliver what they want. Otherwise, it can get diffused in the market. At the same time, as of now, Bajaj Finserv Markets has already started dealing with others. So from a customer acquisition point of view, Bajaj Finance will be just one more partner for Bajaj Finserv Direct. And as time goes on, as more partners get added, obviously their share of the total pie may come down. On the platform side, Bajaj Finserv Direct will continue to support Bajaj Finance for some more time. And we believe this linkage between the two is very positive for both to deliver their own individual business goals. Therefore, as we go, the incremental capital would be contributed by both Finserv, Bajaj Finserv and Bajaj Finance. By the end of that period, we expect that the stake will come down to 19.9% for Bajaj Finance.
Okay, sir. Got it. But the incremental...
It's more like a strategic and financial investment in a significant platform provider.
Got it, sir. Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's useful. And on
in fact, I must hasten to add that over time, maybe 3-5 years from now, even this platform we may offer as a product to other partners.
Okay. So basically, other NBFCs or banks can also tie up with Finserv Marketplace, offering the same solutions to them. That's the way you're trying to say, right?
Over time, yes. As they build their business, and when they get to a reasonable number of customers, and more partners will get. They have already started adding partners, and over time they'll continue to add more partners. Because the risk appetite of each lender is different, and as they want, and depending on the segment of customers, they could offer differential products. The idea is people come to us and they can also compare products of others through our own ecosystem, and they can choose what they want. So eventually it will become a free marketplace where customers choose, and hopefully our manufacturing entities, Bajaj Finance, BALIC, will end up getting a higher share of the profit pool if they compete very well. But they have to compete in this marketplace.
Got it, sir. Fine. Other question is on one is on life and actually two on life and one on general. So on life insurance, just wanted to understand the gross impact of 288 crores which we have taken with respect to COVID in the current year. How much? I mean, it will be the number net of tax will be flown through EV as a negative mortality experience. Is my understanding right? And second, just wanted to understand in this 304 crores of outstanding provisioning with respect to COVID, how much is IBNR and how much is or is it complete? I mean, IBNR only for the claims which are only till reported till June, expected to be reported till June, or you have provided anything beyond June also in this 304 crore number. That's the first question on BALIC. And second question on BALIC, just wanted to understand the banker channel mix, if you can provide access and especially the new banker relationships like RBL, IDFC, KVB, how much they are contributing on incremental basis.
I think the first question I will give it to Tarun, and the second question probably Bharat can give you a flavor on paid versus reserving, plus how the general approach towards reserving is adopted by BALIC.
Sure.
Actually, conversely, maybe
Okay.
Bharat should answer the
Fair
first
enough.
one.
Yeah.
Bharat.
So basically this 288 number, the net impact on the PAT is 255 crore for the quarter. And as we will be declaring our EV on a half yearly basis, what we have agreed, so that will also flow to the EV as a net worth change. With respect to the overall clear outstanding of 304 crore rupees, this is the net amount which we are carrying, out of which 98 crore was as of March 21. And in this quarter, we have created a 206 crore of additional COVID reserves. So that extent, 304 crore is a net amount, which broadly in terms of the gross claims can support up to around 425 to 430 crore rupees of claims. So those are the two numbers. In case any specific, I can answer that also.
So basically, given we paid around gross claims of 117 in the current quarter, so we can safely assume that around 3.5x to 4x kind of a number could be sufficient to from that 304 crore number, what is sitting in the balance sheet. That's the way I should read it, right, sir?
Yeah. So basically what we have done, we have looked at our quarter, the past experience for this quarter. What Srini also mentioned that during the May and June, we saw a second wave impact. So we have kind of looked at a various segment level, whether it is GTL, MFI and retail, and basis our estimate that how much claims can come. So technically it can cover a claim up to maybe July, August, September, October, but as a lot of claims comes with a delay, so there is a projection which we have taken. So to that extent, it is as on date what we think that the potential claims can come. Obviously, it does not include anything on the wave 3, potential wave 3 if it comes on.
Got it, sir. Got it. Sir, can you break down that 117 crores, if possible, on individual business, group business, and say maybe credit protect business? If you're okay to give that data, just wanted to understand the way the pain is.
See, basically the breakup of the actual claim, that 117 crore, that's a gross number. On the net basis, net of RI, the number was around 112 crore rupees. 101 crore rupees for retail, and the balance was for the group. So total claim is 112 crore, which has come into the books. And if I remove the PAR element and the UL fund value option, then the net impact is 96 crore rupees for the quarter. So we have 96 crore rupees of actual claim and another 192 crore rupees net of PAR COVID reserve. So hence total number is 288 crore of the total number, and net of tax is 255 crore for the quarter.
Got it, sir. Perfect. And if you can answer that on Axis or banker relationship with respect to new banks and Axis Bank.
Sure. So let me just step in on that. Yes, so now we are into a lot more diverse set of relationships. And maybe next time we will bucketize these separately and give more details out. But just to mention, Axis is about 18% of our top line. And after that, we've got a few partnerships actually over the last 3 years, which includes 4 small finance banks, IDFC, RBL, Karur Vysya Bank, and of course some small Gulf-based banks as well.
Right.
So we bucketize them in 2 parts: emerging bancassurance and partnership distribution. Put together, this segment has about 10% now with us, with various banks contributing to, because they're still, I'd say, emerging in terms of the relationship. We've just started putting resources in the last 2 quarters of last year. So they've now started moving up. And this will increase. So conceptually, we do want to move to a highly diversified distribution.
Got it, sir. Okay. So out of 42% of the total industry business, you are saying 18% is Axis Bank in the current quarter, right, sir?
Correct.
Okay. Perfect. That answers my question. Finally, on Bajik, just one point wanted to little failing to understand why there is such a gap between NPW and NEP in the current quarter, given the growth has come back. Maybe if it's a slowing year, I understand, but we reported 9% growth. Still, NPE number seems to be substantially higher compared to NPW number. Is it just contributed by 1/365 rule or something else which we need to understand the difference between NEP and NPW?
Raman, would you like to take that? It's about NEP growth compared to last quarter.
So Sanket, there's no change we've done. It's simply 1/365. So it's basis what we've written in the past. So no other reason beyond that.
But I think business mix also changes. Some are low retention, like high-end corporate business. So as the business mix changes, the earning rate also changes. But this is, I think, par for the course. I think across quarters it will get normalized.
Absolutely.
Got it, sir. So finally, on the two-wheeler, we saw a very strong growth. Just wanted to understand the mix of how it is moved into two-wheelers, given that we have probably ended up reporting very strong growth. And a related item, what could be the likely advance premium accretion which has happened because the way we are seeing strong growth in two-wheeler segment?
So the total advance premium outstanding is about 1,100 crores as we stand today.
Okay. And two-wheeler mix, if you are okay to share it, sir?
See, we've not been disclosing that, Sanket.
Okay. Fair enough, sir. Sorry. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Bharat Shah from ASK Investment Managers Limited. Please go ahead.
Hi. Good morning to everybody. I'm continue to get delighted by structural improvement in life insurance part of our business, and on the general insurance, our prudent and wise approach continues. So those are both most pleasing aspects in the way insurance business, both the businesses are shaping up. My core question is, while general insurance, given the nature, is a shorter term product, and especially some segments like automobile are more closer to commodity, and therefore this probably is more push oriented. But life insurance and some of the segments of the general insurance should be more pull-oriented, and life insurance in particular being a longer-term contract where solidity, reliability of the insurer are very important issues from the perspective of the customer. On the other end, when I see the brand building efforts, I see mostly by aggregator, where you see advertisements by some Policybazaar and others all the time. So it somehow, this is a comment of the industry in general, not just Bajaj Finserv, but it gives an impression that aggregator seems to be becoming a brand, while the actually underwriters of the insurance contracts are kind of into the background. So I was curious to understand the brand building, direct pull sector, relationship creating nature of the insurance rather than being pushed as a commodity, and where the power then over the period of time shifts to the aggregator.
Yeah.
I heard that, Bharat. The point is valid, but if you see across the world, largely life insurance is a push business. Basically distribution is a very important component, while some segments of non-life tend to become pull businesses over time, especially motor insurance, because it's bundled with and it's statutorily required. There is some amount of pull. And health insurance, in certain times when there is a scare factor, it becomes a pull business. But in life insurance, it's a long journey. Over time, I think if you compare what life insurance companies are doing now with what was happening 5-7 years ago, they have made significant improvement in customer experience, significant improvement in disclosures to customers in terms of the ease of buying, in the ease of owning, in terms of digital processes. I think it is not comparable at all what was happening 7-8 years ago and what is happening now. Even if you see the mis-selling complaints and all have come down quite substantially. So over time, retention is very important. How much you are able to retain in terms of persistency of the existing contracts, plus are you able to get more money from the existing customers, because that is the ultimate sign of a pull business. I think on all these fronts, for example, our BALIC Direct, which is a channel we set 3 years ago, is working quite hard. I think their persistencies are very high. We are working on portfolio management type of structures there. And we believe that we continue this effort. Over time, we will be able to acquire more customers, keep them, and also get more money from them. Unfortunately, in the case of life insurance, the role of bank assurance is very high. People tend to keep a lot of money with banks in terms of wealth management, PMS, and various other things. And therefore, banks have the data edge. They already have customers. They already know about them. They know their spending habits, their saving habits. So they tend to have an edge, and therefore that channel of distribution is very important. Having said that, the banks are not going to give it cheap either. They have a choice of, 23 odd life insurers, and they have a chance to play with them. So I think this will evolve. That is my take on this. In terms of aggregators in life insurance, I think largely on term life and all, they will do much higher. Their share of the total market is still not very significant. It may be under 3 or 4%. In terms of general insurance, yes, in motor insurance, we have seen in UK and all that aggregators do tend over time to dominate the new car purchases. But in India, it is still dominated by OEMs, and we have a very strong presence there. Tarun, Tapan, would you like to add anything to that?
Let me just step in. So Bharat, it's an interesting question, and brand building is particularly close to my heart in the life sector. And you are right that it is a very critical component, particularly of the life sector, because a building of a brand requires lots of elements that come in, and I think that's where the nuances also play out versus the aggregator and the various manufacturers. So, for example, the best way of building a brand is like experience one customer gets with you with the transactions. Now, unlike banks, NBFCs, and the GI business, LI is not very heavy on transactions. So, experience is what you see on a lesser action basis. So, every interaction, whatever little they have with us, has to be spick and span, has to be really convenient. And as Srini therefore said, that therefore the investment in marketing platforms becomes critical. The difference between what we're talking about, aggregator and the manufacturers, and I'll answer it for manufacturers in a generic way and maybe a little bit for us, is that the aggregators usually want to go on mass media and build, and their job is comparison, right? So they're just comparing. They just want eyeballs coming. The moment the eyeballs come in, then the brand of the manufacturer comes into play. And of course, there is a pricing element, given the fact that it's a very narrow product that is at play. The difference between us and the aggregators is that our spends are quite wide into channel marketing, into multimedia, which could be a lot more digital, could be a lot more specific the segments we want to get into. So, for example, in BALIC, we've been spending a lot on marketing. May not be visible in general to everybody, but it is. I believe we are making impact in the segments that we want to. As an example, in this quarter, and I talked about it a little bit, we were largely focused on building the brand on the annuity side of the business, which we introduced in the last quarter as a product, last quarter of last year. And this has really paid off. It's 12% of our this quarter business. So actually, we've got a good ROI on that investment. And we've been investing in platforms. We've been building in experiences that customers get. We've been building on the data management behind it. And as a result, in fact, we've been spending a lot on marketing. Whether it is a mass media and all, that usually is the media mix that we intend to play with. Usually for us, it is the first quarter is not the best time to get onto the mass media. Usually it's not justifiable on the number of transactions you see. While, as you know, the aggregators may actually be looking for they may have various reasons. They may also be going for listing. So, which may not be the case in us. So, the reasons are different. Our overall underlying bit is that when somebody looks at a life insurance product, we should be present at that very moment through the right channel, with the right motivation for the right for the distributor, right knowledge with the distributor, and the right offering for the customer. Now that's a 360-degree way of looking at service marketing, which is very different from what you see play out in the mass media. So this is classical service marketing.
I would just like to highlight the life goals approach that we took a few years ago, and how
Maybe I can talk about that as well.
That's underlying.
So we changed our entire tack to life goals and being life goals enablers. Now that requires a very systemic investment over a period of time, and we've only been increasing that investment. And what we've been focusing on is product marketing, particularly for various life goal segments. And now like I said, we've into all the relevant segments with the annuity business falling in place. And that is what we will intend to do for the next 5 to 7 years. We're very clear about that. And our platforms are going to do the speaking a lot. The other bit, if I might add, is also how we go with pre-approved offers to existing customers. That's possibly the most efficient to keep our cost of acquisition low. And that is something, if you're not a customer of ours, of course, you need to buy a policy, Bharat, and then you'll see us more often. So these are very targeted marketing plans. I hope I've answered your question.
Sure. But if I take each of those elements, I mean, 3 critical elements. Platform is a way of distribution mechanism, customer experience and service, help and enhanced by digital journey, and brand building and pull factor. So customer experience part, I understand what you are saying. I also understand the platform building efforts to widen and deepen distribution capability. But I'm saying soft touch aspect of building the brand, where not just the existing customer, but a potential new customer is favorably inclined towards insurance brand, rather than being just mercenary basis sold only through the distribution mechanism. That brand building subtle effort that whenever a particular prospective customer is ready, he kind of thinks of first name of recall, let us say is Bajaj a life insurance solution. That brand building effort, I am saying, seems to be not visible. And not just for BALIC and portions of the business of BAGIC. In general, for the insurance industry, it seems to be kind of handed over on platter to the distribution channel, or at least that is the impression I'm having, maybe wrongly.
No, so I think there is nothing right or wrong in this, Bharat. It's all I would say is if there is an X amount of money to be spent and Y amount of output to be taken out of that. So we have to balance out over the year and over the life of our offerings, how we play this. So this will vary, but if you are seeing it as a trend for all life insurance companies, and lots of life insurance companies are sitting with pots of money and they're not maybe investing, so there must be some logic behind it. That's what I will only just allude to.
Okay. This is Tapan here. Yeah. If you look at Bharat in terms of brand for BAGIC and all the brand reports you'll watch, that BAGIC brand is rated as the best brand in the general insurance market, way above other brands. So by independent reports, whenever you get a hand on that, you'll be watching that. one of our philosophy has been, because if you look at the general insurance industry, claims happen, no? The frequency of claims is high. Our obsession has been that we should be the best claim payers in the Indian market. And if you see over time, no, all the awards that we won or all the rating that we get, we are rated as one of the best claim payers in the Indian market. And that is what our obsession has been. For us, our product is not that we are selling a policy. Our product is that we are settling claims in the best possible manner to our customer, in the fairest possible manner, and the best claim experience should be there. And we've been doing it consistently, and that is why our brand has a very strong recall in terms of where we are. And that is the point when you're saying, even if you have aggregators in the market, aggregators can only sell policies, and they can do a price comparison. But the experience of the policy when a claim happens is up to the manufacturers, and that is where the difference comes in. And that is where, as the Bajaj General Insurance Company, we are focused very high on that. And if you look at all brand reports and all, you'll find that Bajaj General Insurance Company is way above any other brand in terms of the general insurance industry. And if you look at a claim settlement and a positioning in the market as far as claim settlement is concerned, and if you look at any kind of survey reports or any kind of report, you'll find us among the best in terms of doing that. So it's a combination of it, because in general insurance you have claims, you have experiences, and the moment of truth keeps on happening. It is how you focus on that. And that is precisely why if you're a good claim settler and you do it very fairly, I don't think there's a major threat from a aggregator's perspective, because they may be able to sell a policy at a much cheaper rate, but when an experience of a claim happens, that is where the moment of truth happens, and that is where good companies get differentiated from average companies.
Sure. No, I appreciate. Just one last small point I'll make. So from all that I heard, what I surmise is that brand building effort is part of our conscious recognition, and it is something that we are focused on, and brand building is not something left as an accidental happenstance, but it will be a long-term kind of a conscious strategic choice. And secondly, the brand building spend and the efforts are in sync with the return on investment or ROI equation compliant. Is that a fair way to summarize what I heard?
Yes. But I think it is spot on. BALIC has chosen life goals as their main plank on which they will deliver all this. BAGIC has chosen care as the main plank on which they will do that. In the short run, customers will take time to appreciate it, but investment into these brands will continue. Not just through the traditional means. I think you may not see too much on the above-the-line TV and all those media advertising, which are very short recall nowadays. But we spend a lot on digital marketing, on mobile apps, through multiple channels. So I think it's fair. Anything to add, Tarun Tapan, on this?
Yeah, so as Srini,
I think you summarized it quite well, actually.
Yeah, you actually summed up well, Srini, in the initial stage also, and what Mr. Bharat said also is right. But insurance brand building, is something which is very interesting. So unlike maybe an FMCG brand building, an insurance brand building requires trust, and trust does not happen like in a microsecond. It is led by demonstrations over time of what you have said and how you stood for it. And over time it gets built. So if you look at powerful insurance brand across the world, you'll find most of them have stood the test of time and delivered to customers over time. I think this is where that is relevant. And if you look at what Tarun said or what I spoke about, I think if you try to look at that angle, that comes out very clearly, that building long-term trust, staying true to our commitments, delivering on the ground, and being with the customer in times of need, and ensuring that they have a very good experience is what builds a long-term brand. Along with obviously the activity that we do for marketing, which is there, and digital is what we've been focusing on a pretty high note, simply because if you look at customers today, I think they watch more digital views than on television. I think that is what the research also is showing, and it's a combination also. We also use television, so we'll keep on building it. Insurance brands over time become very, very powerful if the commitment to what they've been promising has been there.
Right. So I'll just I think all of us have added significant to that, and Bharat, a very interesting question that was, which is why you see the answers coming in from everybody. Maybe I'll just close with just two statements here. For services, number of times your brand is as good as your last interaction. That is one statement, which is where what Tapan also said was very important, the way you play your claims. The second is the Bajaj brand. I think there is enough trust behind that in any case. So I think we ride on both.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. Okay. Thank you, and all the best.
Thank you, Bharat.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Hasmukh Kala from Finvest Advisors. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hello. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to ask the question. My question was pertaining to the digital initiatives which are being taken by the group. Now, what I see that individual company has done work on digitization, automation, and things like that. Balik has done separately, Magic has done separately, Bajaj Finserv has done separately, Bajaj Finance has done separately, and now you are, I think, probably trying to put everything in Bajaj Finance Direct. That is what I would like to know.
See, let me get this clear on this aspect. One is, you see, there is a fundamental difference between some of these businesses. If you look at insurance business as compared to, say, the lending business is largely, I think, customer come to there because they need money. So you buy a house, you take a home loan. And therefore, when the customer comes in, the rest of the entire investment goes into how to keep the customer there, how to make them use Bajaj Finance when they need money again. And now the new transformation will also ensure that while they are in our ecosystem, they keep getting engaged through the acceleration of the payments and other platforms that they are building. In the case of insurance, it's a journey. Once the customer comes, we can't say that I don't need insurance tomorrow. They have to stay, most of the insurances, they have to stay through their life, whether it's health insurance, life insurance, or even car insurance, throughout as long as they own a car. Therefore, the approach has to be different. Insurance continues to be heavily intermediated businesses, and there's no need to look down upon intermediated businesses, whether it is agency or bank assurance. We have some fantastic intermediaries who actually deliver substantial value to both the customer and the insurance companies. Therefore, the approach has to be different. At the back end, we do have, at the group level, through the efforts of Finserv, councils where technology partners, where they discuss technologies that are happening, where they also share best practices across the technology teams. So therefore, given that while we allow companies a substantial amount of freedom in doing what they want, at the back end they also collaborate quite a lot in terms of the platforms and the resources that they use. The individual strategies and delivery is obviously left to the companies. Finserv Markets is not a digital platform for the group. Initially, when we set up the company, there was a thinking like that, but it is an open marketplace. To the extent that there is some commonality with Bajaj Finance, they are providing that platform to Bajaj Finance. But in terms of insurance, they would just be dealing in APIs, and the insurance company's role is largely to provide the APIs, the risk algorithms, the products, and the customer insight will remain with the Bajaj Finserv Direct. So it is not a technology platform for the group. It is the front end of a digital marketplace. So I hope I got that clear.
Yeah. Now, we said in our press release that we are contributing 342 crore and Bajaj Finance 284 crore. So, all the initiatives, to take them to the logical conclusion, how much more capital you will have to provide, and whether you will go down below 20% or 19.9%?
See, that over time, we have to see this business is still a startup. The next 2 to 3 years are very critical. Whatever numbers you have seen in our stock exchange communication indicate this is the expected amount of capital that we feel will be required for this year and the next year for Bajaj Finserv Direct. Now, there are two segments to it. In this business, you have to continue to invest in new capabilities, new investments, new partnerships. At the same time, the existing customers who come in, they need to be in the ecosystem and transact with us across the entire marketplace, whether they want to. So it is like a supermarket. You can get loans, you can get credit cards, you can get insurance, you can buy investments, and even participate in the e-store. So this is the marketplace. So you'll have existing customers, and so they will look at it both differently. As customers come in, they will increase the engagement levels with existing customers, offer them greater choices, have campaigns or whatever is needed to do that. And there will be a new investment required till it reaches a scale and what we call a normalized level of growth. So as of now, this amount that we have mentioned should be sufficient for us for the next 2 years. And because even now it is, I would say, about 50% R&D and 50% business, because we have seen the green shoots, which are quite substantial, and we like this business quite a lot. We will continue to invest. Now, in the future, all possibilities are open. Will there be other kind of partners entering this? Maybe. What type of partners, what capability they bring, what purpose they are coming in. These, we have not taken a decision at all on this, but I think our mind is open. This will remain a neutral marketplace, and we will build it up to the scale that we think is good. Obviously, as a business, there are a lot of risks, and we will play it as it goes along. So you have the manufacturers at the back end, you have this marketplace at the front end, and underlying all this is the Bajaj brand of trust and long-term value.
Okay, that's fine. My second question is on budget. Do you have any rethinking on crop? Because we didn't write any crop in this quarter.
No, first quarter there is no crop. No, it's basically Kharif season starts in July.
Achha.
And Rabi is in January. So I think Tapan can give a flavor on that.
Yeah. So if you look at crop insurance, this quarter, the next one, you will see a pickup here happening. So it depends on how the tenders get done, how the announcements happen at the government. Like Maharashtra came in later this time, no? Earlier they were not planning to come in. So obviously the announcement began a bit later. So you'll see the booking happen this quarter.
Okay. Thank you very much. Wish you all the best.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Nidhesh Jain from Investec. Please go ahead.
Thanks for the opportunity, sir. So firstly, on the life insurance, two questions. One is, our margins have improved quite significantly over last 2 years, around 12-13% VNB margin. But some of the companies which are having bancassurance partner are operating at around 25% margin. So do we think that over next 3 to 5 years that the bridge between the gap between our margin and some of the larger players can reduce over a period of time, given that our product mix has now already been stabilized quite a bit. Some of the high margin products like protection and annuity has already been forming decent share of our product mix. Do you expect VNB margin gap between ourselves and large players bridging, and what could be the drivers of that?
This is directionally what we would like. Now, we can't compare exactly number to number because part of the margin is highly volatile, especially on the non-par segment, where there is an element of interest rate. While a lot of us have hedged it and tried to reduce that volatility, I think the margins will fluctuate depending on your business mix. Obviously, as part of our first level of transformation, as Tarun said earlier, that's more or less complete. But if we continue to grow like this, over time, our fixed costs will get absorbed over larger volumes, and we should see that the net margin should improve. At a gross margin level, we are already very close to the top 5 players. The pure captive banks with single partnerships definitely have an edge because they are not offering multiple companies, and they have an arrangement between their own group companies. But other than that, I think if you compare with any other multi-level, which do not have a composite partner and who are dealing with independent bank tie-ups or building up their own agency force or direct channels like we are doing, we think we are already on the right track. Tarun?
I think largely answered by Srini. I'll just maybe take a minute more to say a few things. I think Srini touched on the fact that as we grow faster, which implies scale, there is still a significant scale that we can achieve, and that's a gap. Scale also has an underlying benefit of productivity is getting better, which show up in bottom line. Product mix, we are largely there, but now we have to figure out how can we take more out of this. The other movement is on the customer segments, because customer segments do have an impact on persistency and on ability of customers to maybe reinvest and buy more. And that is something we still have to work on, and we'll continue that path. So it's a journey, and I think the more and more we get into details, the more we'll get better. And every company is working towards strength, and that's all I would say.
Sure. Secondly, what would be the provision for future claims from COVID? The provision that we have provided is entirely IBNR, or we are also make some provisions for the future claims after Q1, which may come on account of COVID?
Yeah, as of now, I think Bharat has already clarified in great detail in an earlier question. Maybe you missed that. But it includes a provision for all the actually reported claims. It also has what we believe, using our analytical models, what we expect from the current wave of COVID. We have not planned for, because nobody knows whether there will be a third wave, whether that will be intense, how intense it will be. These are, anybody's guess. And therefore, as it evolves, we will be looking into those. Having said that, I think one of the great strengths that we have is our surplus solvency. These are difficult times when capital is king, and we have enough of that. And we hope that will help us, provide the right sort of cushion for this.
Sure. And on the general insurance business, in the motor segment specifically, if I look from a longer term perspective of last 7-8 years data, we have lost a bit of market share in the motor segment, and within motor segment, the market share loss is more pronounced in the motor OD, while I think in motor third party we have gained market share. So any particular reason why in that segment we have lost market share over last 7 to 8 years?
There is no specific answer to that question because motor is not very simple, because motor has got many segments. There are geographies, there are risk policies of different companies. There are smaller players who will get into motor business in a big way because it's the most visible and easier to sell among all others for a startup company. So competition will be more intense there. However, we have been growing in the segments that we like. Yes, last couple of years, commercial vehicles has been a bit slow on the segments that we like, particularly passenger vehicles. But I can ask Tapan to actually add flavor to that.
So one way to look at it is, if you look at it in the GI business, any company which would start new would start with a motor base. So if you look at all the new companies, you will see that motor is significantly very high in their portfolio, because as discussed earlier, that's the easier business to acquire, and move forward. So if you see, as number of players move up in the insurance industry, the motor market share will get distributed over time. So not only for us, across you'll see this happen. The smaller players would gain more market share, and since it's a limited pool, you will see a shift in market share happening. Now that is not the important thing. The important thing is to see that is the shift happening in businesses which the company prefers to have or not. So look at Bajaj. We have been a strong four-wheeler player over time, and there we have a strength, and you'd actually be seeing that over time in the years, quite a few years, we have gained market share. Some we would have lost, but mostly we would have gained. If you look at this quarter, our private market share, four-wheeler, we have gained substantially. Then the other part was that we were pretty good in the commercial vehicle space, in an era in which we had a substantial market share, and obviously we made good profits there, which the market observed, and so more players have come to that space. So when you have more players coming to space, the market share will get distributed. So it's a normal phenomena which will happen for motor business as you progress and go forward. If the market, the overall motor keeps on moving up, I think the industry would keep on gaining from that perspective. But I don't think that is something that would be not what we would have thought through or seen through. So when you have limited players, the same market should be divided. And Bajaj has been a strong retail player from the very beginning compared to its peers, which came to retail later. So obviously our retail presence was much higher. And from the same pool, other players will also try to move into this. So that should be the way to look at this. Does it answer your question?
Yes. And on the health insurance, what I see that Sahis are growing at almost 40%, 50%. Some of the Sahis have become 10x of our size in terms of retail health insurance. While we have been there for 20 years, they have been just for 10 years. So why do you think multi-line insurance companies have not been able to scale? I know there is a regulatory arbitrage in terms of agency channel, but I don't think that completely explains the differential in scale that they have been able to achieve versus us.
No, I think your question has the answer itself. So if you look at the scale of Sahi in terms of premium and look at the agency portfolio, you will see a substantial amount of life insurance in the Sahi agency, if you look at a bifurcation of that, and the health insurance space. So I think the arbitrage that they have of being able to sell health through any agent is a very powerful arbitrage. We should not underestimate it and not say that it is not substantial. It's very substantial because see, to build an agent, you acquire an agent, you train the agent, you teach products, you get the agent license. It's a task and it's a journey, and then as the agent matures, and then they start selling. So it's a journey when you're building agency, and that's why agency is a pretty intense channel to build. Let's say if you're an arbitrage, you can pick up any agent, and start selling your product. And especially, let's say, if I look at the SAHI group of companies and their major agency force comes from the life agency, and that they can do without the requisite infrastructure putting it up. That gives a huge boost. So if you look at number of agents of some of the big SAHI groups, that runs into like 2 lakhs, 3 lakh agents. And look at any general insurance company, the largest one, like amongst us, they would have like 50,000, 60,000 agents, which requires a lot of time to build this force. So that arbitrage is a big arbitrage, and that does give a huge push to business, which would be there.
There is one more angle to this, is that, we are composite insurance companies. Ultimately, in the long run, general insurance is a business of risk. And therefore, having property and casualty in the right mix is what composite companies do. So, like if you have a catastrophe in fire, you could make money in motor. Or when you have both motor and fire, there are issues, you could have health growing. We saw that last year. A monoline will have to achieve a much higher scale to achieve the same level of profitability. Most of the health insurance business is low float, like motor third party, that kind of benefit you don't get. So therefore, the float benefit is also much lower. But they are specialized. It is like comparing a composite player with a niche player, because they will be selling only one type of, one group of products. In that, they will get more specialization, no doubt. But in our case, we will have to continuously manage our risk, and that is what gives us more profitability. If you have seen our combined ratios or our profitability or ROEs of the top 2 or 3 insurance companies, we are really up there.
Thank you. We take the last question from the line of Nischint Chawathe from Kotak Securities Limited. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. 2 questions from my side. Maybe you touched a little bit upon it, but on the same point about.
Nischint, we lost you.
Hello, yeah, am I audible?
Yeah, now you're audible. Yeah.
So on the same point on the health side, did you consider setting up a health subsidiary separately to kind of capitalize on the arbitrage, or you kind of probably felt that look, there's just too much of a risk because it's a standalone player, so might as well skip it?
See, we are at it at the BFS level, because as of now, IRDA is not very clear whether an existing insurance company should set up a subsidiary or not. So if you know, some of the mergers have happened also. I think even the standalone company has been merged into the other company. At a BFS level, we have considered that, but see, these arbitrage and all is not a long-term thing. At some point, it will go away. And if you see last few years, the composite companies have also been growing their health portfolio quite well. So it is something we considered, and obviously we do have a joint venture arrangement with Allianz, and both partners we do discuss this, but we have not taken a decision to set up another company yet.
And just pertaining to FinServ Direct, where Bajaj Finance is kind of
Yes.
the company is working closely with Bajaj Finance, and I think now Bajaj Finance is also invested in that company. If this is a kind of a open access platform where you expect other lenders to come in,
Right.
On the face of it, wouldn't be like that Bajaj Finance will always have an upper hand over here?
Why would they have an upper hand? See, a 19.9% stake does not give them any upper hand. It is only because of the strategic nature of the platform they are building for Bajaj Finance that they will share. On the customer acquisition, FinServ Direct does its own decisions. They will build their own this thing over time. Obviously, as the company started, they did have the advantage or some things like e-store and all. They did borrow on Bajaj Finance's network. But as time goes by, they will start adding more partners to every line of their business. You can see already in insurance, they have other partners. Some of them are not partners with Bajaj Finance as well. There are limitations on insurance side because of the regulation that they can't become a broker, but they will go with a corporate agent model only. Similarly, on investments, they will build. So it's a completely different thing. I don't think a stake means that they are not independent. I mean, if you see mutual funds, every distributor is open market, right? And nobody is pushing any particular mutual fund. So the stake is not to control Bajaj Finserv Direct. It is only to ensure that continuity of support is there. And the future is, they are, in terms of the technology, the platform, they will be collaborating.
And even in case of future partnerships, you might want to kind of, the banking partner might kind of, consider, or you might kind of consider, an investor as a banking partner or an NBFC partner.
As I said earlier, it is not, as of now, we cannot take a call because until this company reaches a scale, we may not consider that, but it is not ruled out. That's all I can say now.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Sure. Great. Thank you very much and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last question. I would now like to hand the conference over to Ms. Bunny Babji for closing comments.
On behalf of JM Financial, I would like to thank Srini sir, the top management of the insurance businesses, and all the participants for joining us on the call today. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you all. It's been our pleasure.
Thank you. On behalf of JM Financial, that concludes this conference. Thank you everyone for joining us, and you may now disconnect your line.
Thank you.